the best sex happens in the body. And a lot of us think we're in our bodies when we're having sex, but we're actually not. Most people are in their heads.
Most people are just paying attention to the peak pleasure experience. But if we start engaging with our bodies with that deeper sense of presence, embodied awareness, and activation of our senses, we start noticing that, oh yeah, pussy's lit, she's wet, she's great, and ooh, my feet touching the sheets in this bed, that is so pleasurable. What is sensual for you? What is a pleasurable touch that you can bring to your skin? Giving voice to your pleasure.
So can you give us a good practice for accessing states of pleasure?
Yeah.
I'm Layla Martin. I'm your host of This Tantric Life. This podcast is for you to learn about and be able to use the incredibly powerful system of Tantra in your life. I have been teaching and studying classical and neo-Tantra for over 20 years. And when you apply that to sex, love, and relationships, as I love to do, you end up having conscious relationships, the deepest, most epic and magical sex, and the kind of intimacy that you get to be grateful for on your deathbed.
Hi, and welcome back to This Tantric Life. I'm your host, Layla Martin, and I'm sitting here today with one of my senior VITA teachers. We have worked together for years. She is also a somatic trauma healer and embodiment coach. I am going to white girl this and try and pronounce it in the proper Portuguese, which is Marina Nabão. She is one of my favorite people. She is a potent teacher. She embodies so much of what is possible when we heal from deep trauma, sexual abuse, racial trauma, all kinds of trauma around family abandonment and disintegration, and how we can live lives of pleasure, true love in marriage, deep, outrageous, orgasmic joy as an expression of our spirituality. She is someone that I love so deep, heart and soul, respect so much as a leader and a teacher, and I'm so excited to share with you today her journey through trauma healing and into being able to claim her full life as a sacred sexuality teacher, as a trauma healer, a somatic embodiment coach and leader, and also so much of her wisdom around basic practices that you can do to heal sexual trauma, to start your pleasure practice, and to be able to embody this kind of wisdom for yourself. Welcome, Marina.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
I love that most of the time when we get to hang out, because we're on our retreats, we're like in lingerie or like disco pussy with like, I mean, people don't know this about us, but in the crystal egg class, in crystal egg power, when we do train the weightlifting with the pelvic floor, we will tie disco balls and sometimes little fuzzy dice to the crystal egg. So I always think of you, you have these like beautiful little disco balls on your headband, and I think of you as like, yeah, get the women to lift disco balls with their pussies. It's Marina.
Pussy power activate.
Yes.
That's the mantra.
So take us into your life from Brazil to corporate to falling in love to baby, right? Congratulations for being the most pregnant woman that I have interviewed. I'm so excited. To like, how do you go from your life to a room full of women lifting disco balls with their pussies?
Yes. How exactly is still a mystery for me, but I trust the goddess, so I'll just do it. So I grew up in Brazil, basic middle class, biracial family, went to, education school, then business, worked in corporate for 14 years in Brazil, traveling around the world, establishing business partnerships, until one day I heard about Neo-Tantra, and I went to a workshop back there. I had a very bad breakup with a boyfriend back then, and I just wanted to get it out of my body. And that opened a new door for me of connection with my body, with my erotic self, and this idea that was still very new for me of accessing more of my spirituality. I have always been a very deeply spiritual person, but through my sexuality, through my, erotic aliveness.
Can you take us to a moment in that workshop of what it's like to be a corporate woman coming from a middle-class family, and all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, my heart's broken, and now I'm in this Tantra workshop. And it sounds like it changed your life. It changed the trajectory of your life. So can you take us there to a moment of that workshop? What did you learn? What were you doing that showed you that?
Breathwork. So we did a very intense breathwork practice, 49 minutes, 7 minutes focusing on each chakra. And I had a massive awakening that here we call Kundalini awakening. Yep. So I saw the universe. I saw all the gods and goddesses. I saw all the people. And I felt, you know, when we talk about universal love, I felt that with every cell of my body and as part of it. Yeah. And I felt such forgiveness for the world. Yeah. Forgiveness for the people who hurt me. Forgiveness for myself for hurting people. Forgiveness for everything. Yeah. And that was actually what completely changed my view of life and of my own role in this planet. Yeah. Right? That was what ignited my transformation and all the changes that happened in my life since then. But yes, it was through breath work, open mouth, connected breath, big room full of people, great teacher, very good with energy awakening, loud music, and just, I felt the divine. Yeah. Without knowing that's what I was going to get. I thought I would feel some pleasure, you know. I was in it for, you know, the lustness of it. But it was divine. Yeah.
I'm here to let you know that if you want to stay connected to my teachings and if you want to support this podcast, the best way to do it is to sign up for my email list. Email list sounds old school, and yet it is where I share my most intimate teachings, the path, process, heartbreak, and triumph of my life, and so much of the content that I make for you on a regular basis. So the way you get on the email list is by heading over to laylamartin.com, put your email address into any of the boxes. You can also sign up for cool practices like sex magic or energy orgasm, totally free. Heading on over to laylamartin.com, signing up with your email address. This supports the podcast. It supports this entire work and is the #1 way for you to receive the highest teachings of this path.
There's 3 points in there that I kind of want to emphasize. #1 being that when people don't understand what a tantric retreat can be, there can be this kind of culture like, ooh, you know, all these like privileged navel gazers, like stroking their own pussies or whatever. And you're like, yes, there can always be an element to that. And these awakenings that we can have on retreat are truly life-changing. I don't know who I would be without retreats. I think the other thing that you're bringing is how potent breathwork can be. Yeah. It's so beautiful that it's gone so mainstream, right? And that you can do kind of casual everyday breathwork. Like when I'm going to do breathwork on the beach right now or every single day, like I use the Wim Hof app or I'll do, 30 rounds of sensual breathing or something like that. Like I'm not necessarily blasting off to the universe every time. So it's cool that breathwork has sort of spread to the world as like you can access it this way. And there is this point where breathwork can become the most potent spiritual, sexual, psychedelic experience of your life, even when you're completely sober. Yes. It reminds me of Andrew going into the jungle, and he met up in the Amazon with it was 5 men who had been drinking ayahuasca for 6 weeks and barely eating. And he led them in a breathwork session, and every single one of them said the breathwork was more powerful than the 6 weeks of ayahuasca they had just done. Now, it's probably all correlated, right? Yeah. They were super primed to have that kind of experience. But I know how deeply you connect to breathwork and how much part of our teaching alchemy is just deep shared love for breathwork. Yeah. And so I just want to emphasize how potent that practice can be.
Yes. And when it's done in a room with other people, with a teacher who has, the mastery of it, that is really when I think people will have the most magnificent experiences, which was my own, right? No wonder nowadays I love teaching it so much because it was mind-blowing. And for me, it was a deeply psychedelic experience. Like I talked to Jesus and Buddha and, Oya, my own divinity from Afro-Brazilian religions. And it was, everything was accessible to me. Yeah.
So then take us from there to, how'd you end up at my Zoom doorstep?
Well, from there, I wanted to learn more about Tantra, and especially new Tantra, this connection between spirituality and sexuality, because I do come from a family of yoginis, right? So I'm not new to the Tantric teachings, but I was new to the sexuality piece. And I wanted to find a teacher that I trusted. Unfortunately, this teacher from that particular workshop is facing multiple cases of people accusing him of inappropriate sexual behavior, all of that.
Totally.
Anyway, I Googled it, found Layla Martin on YouTube. And I started watching your videos, and I loved this vibe that I see in you of a very deep, wise teacher and a playful, joyful, fun, silly at times kind of person. And that's pretty much how I am. I'm super deep, super grounded, super serious at times, and I'm silly. I make silly jokes. So that really attracted me to you.
And I think that's an important point that we even still have to bring to the cohorts in VITA, which we'll talk about in a little bit what VITA is. But Brazilian culture is one of the cultures that didn't forget that spirituality can be fun and outrageous. They're like, let's parade in the streets for God, but we're going to wear feathers and sparkles and look hot, you know? And like white people are like clutching their like pearls and being like, oh, like Jesus is so serious, and we really, I say we as, to me, white culture, forgot this art of the celebration of spirituality. So I love that you could feel that runs so deep in you. And many times you've also thanked Brazilian culture, both for having that as a transmission and also for making pleasure and sensuality such an accepted part of life. It's a culture where no culture is perfect by any means, but where eros is allowed to flow. And I remember being in a hot tub with several wonderful Brazilians, and just this like uninhibited joy of sensuality and eros that like, if that was happening, in my experience with like a bunch of Americans, we'd be like, oh, what's happening? And like, do we need to take more drugs? And is this okay? What does this mean? And to the Brazilians, from my perception, it was like, this is one of the great joys of life. Is to just be in sensuality, is to just be in eros. And it doesn't mean that we have to have sex. It could. It just means we're having a great time dancing and playing and flirting, And there's something to me that's so soul nourishing about that.
Yes, it is. And, I was part of Candomblé, which is the Afro-Brazilian religion, for almost a decade. And one of the most beautiful things about that religion is that we hold rituals that last 24, 36, 48 hours. And of course, it starts with a deep spiritual component to it, but it ends with a party. So we are in a spiritual space. We are honoring the deities. We're dancing with the energies of the different deities, making foods, offerings, singing, all of that. And we're partying. And we start, having a drink and all of this, and people moving their bodies in very sensual ways, all the hips very engaged, right? And I do think that gave me some sort of like, oh, what these neo-tantra people are teaching here. I already know this. Right? That spirituality doesn't need to be a place of containment and repression all the time. On the contrary.
So from there, I don't know at what point you fell in love with your husband on a hiking trail in Patagonia. And tell us a little bit about that, and then your journey of fertility. And then we're going to talk about trauma and pleasure and orgasm and all the things.
Well, so I started doing my own work with sexuality through your programs and awakening beautiful things within me and an erotic power that I didn't know.
Can you take us to a moment of that?
Oh, yeah. I can take it to several. But there was one specific moment when I had my first full body orgasm. And it was one of the practices that Erica was teaching, actually, inside of Oblis.
Yeah.
And then my whole body went into that orgasmic experience. It wasn't focused on my pussy. It was all over me. And it was very similar to the Kundalini awakening that I had, that I was so open to the universe and to love that I was like, oh, fuck. And a deep sense of worthiness. Like for people who know the uses of erotic from Audre Lorde, she talks about the erotic opening us to that deeper power.
Yeah.
And that's what I felt. From that, I started seeing changes in my love life because I had more than a decade of dating people that are very, like, inappropriate for me, let's say.
How so? How were they inappropriate?
Well, I had boyfriends that would cheat and lie and do things that are really out of integrity and that would not match their values with mine.
Yeah.
But I was just repeating boyfriends, you know? The name would change, but the story was the same. And for me, it was because there was a part of me that was not fully attuned to my sense of worthiness, worthiness, of love that can meet me where I am. That's it, simple. Yeah. So in that year, I went to this trekking trip in Patagonia after that bad breakup that I mentioned early. And then I met this man. And we connected in a way, and we started, dating after the trip. And it was a level of love, of not just love, but of presence and openness to a deeper sense of connection that I had not seen before. Yeah. And I had not experienced before. But in a way, I was finally ready. I was finally ready to be with someone mature, to be with someone who has similar values to mine in terms of relationships. And so we did it. We dated for over a year, traveling back and forth, Brazil, US, until we decided to get married. And here we are, right? And of course, our marriage is not perfect. No one's is. But we have a very beautiful, solid, stable connection that I do think I wouldn't be able to hold. And, I wouldn't have the capacity to have this kind of relationship hadn't I done some work on myself and hadn't I found the power of my worthiness through my sexuality.
Yeah. I think it's a hidden aspect of this sexual work because there's such a split in the female psyche, especially, of you can call it virgin and whore, you could call it like wife and mistress, you could call it like girlfriend or hookup, right? And to me, what that is there was a split energetically where you could either be in your heart and up, which makes you wife material, Mother Mary, saintly, good girl, kind, sweet, right? Or you could be down, which makes you slut, whore, mistress, like all of that, right? And what do the men want to fuck? And what do the men want to fall in love with and have as a wife? But what most men will tell you, or anyone of any gender who wants to be with a woman, is like, actually, I wanted both. Like, why did we shortchange ourselves, right? Yeah. And I think what most women haven't realized is that you are both. Yeah. Like, you were created to be both this like beautiful, sexual, wild being and to have this like gorgeous, wondrous heart. But because we have so much conditioning, or at least we definitely do in the United States, I can speak for the United States, that working on your sexuality you know, so many women are like, oh my God, that's going to take me down the path of like, you know, being only poly, right? It'll take you to the path of poly if that's your truth, right? Or it's going to make me, you know, this raging, desirous, like slut. And I'm like, I hope so, but it's not what you think, right? And so there's this feeling like, oh, I'd work on my sexuality and I would become somehow less available for true partnership, but more available for casual sex, right? I can see that in Tinder, dating culture, and everything that's happening right now that we make that association. But really, when you do deep sexual work, when you really get in there and your sexuality reconnects to your heart, you actually have this sexuality that is driven by the power of your heart. And that, to me, from everything that I've seen, is the most desirable for high-quality men that want partnership, right? And if you're disconnected from your sexuality and just in your heart, they're like, oh, that's sweet, right? If you're just in your sexuality, not your heart, understandably, they're like, I don't know if I want to be in a long-term relationship with someone like that. And when you do that unity work and claim yourself and become whole, that makes you so much more available to amazing partnership. And I don't know what you've seen in this. I am available for the fact that you're going through life and you could encounter, let's say, like a bad actor in relationship or dating, right? Like one time you get like the narcissist, the cheater, the abusive person, the closet, just like sociopath, whatever it is, right? Once. If that happens once, it's just like, okay, what do you learn? Like, what'd you learn? Yeah. That sucks. Those relationships are super painful. You can stay in them too long and sustain really deep trauma that can be very hard to work through. And as with anything, you can turn it into a life lesson, right? But if, as you say, you have the same thing over and over again, right? I'm not chosen over and over again, or I'm cheated on over and over again, or this is the fourth narcissist, right? Or this is the like, whatever it is that you want. Or, you know, even for me, it's like, oh, this is the fourth person who's like kind of like on the fence or whatever in the last 10 years, right? And I ran from the men who were like, it's you, I'm all in. I was like, ah! And I was like, oh, someone on the fence, like that seems comfortable, right? And so when I see that, I have never seen that isn't related to some level of terror of love, right? I'm either unworthy of love, or love is scary, or I'm going to get hurt the way I was in childhood, or I'm going to get hurt the way I was in my first sexual encounter, relationship, things like that. Or I'm going to get hurt in the way that I was conditioned to believe, or I'm going to get divorced the way my parents got divorced. Like all of that somewhere can actually form this somatic barrier to love. And while a lot of people don't like hearing that, because at first you can hear it as like, oh, so you're saying all those narcissists were my fault? And it's like, no, they weren't your fault. But when you start doing this work, who you attract changes, and that actually creates a tremendous amount of hope that like the power is actually in your hands, that the power isn't about, oh, are there good enough people out there to date, or are there good enough men out there to date? There are so many good people out there in the world. So if you can do this work and magnetize a much better partnership, that to me is the best news ever.
I'm excited to take a moment and share with you about the VITA coaching certification. This program has been around for almost 10 years, and it is my highest offering. The sexual wellness industry is forecast to be a $125 billion industry by the year 2026. Why is this? Because people are more ready than ever to express their sexuality and build deeply connected, meaningful relationships, and also, obviously, to have the most outrageous orgasms and erotic experiences of their lives. But most people are never taught how to do any of this, how to have extraordinary relationships, how to have the sex they really crave. They're looking for qualified, confident professionals to teach them. And my VITA Sex, Love, and Relationship Coaching Certification is a powerful 1-year professional certification that's helped more than 2,000 coaches make their way to becoming incredibly successful and highly paid sex, love, and relationship professionals. But this program doesn't just train you in every aspect of the coaching process so that you can build a successful online business. VITA Coaching will also walk you through the personal transformation of a lifetime, because the best coaches have done the work themselves. You'll discover so many transformative techniques like breathwork, meditation practices, self-pleasuring tools that you'll apply to your own life first, and then you'll use these same proven tools and techniques to get laser-focused results for your clients. We also hold an exclusive live embodiment retreat just for VITA coaching students and alumni every year. In this retreat, you'll experience 7 days of live teaching with the VITA teachers and I, and really refine your skills as a sex, love, and relationship coach. So if you feel called to claim your spot in this multi-billion-dollar industry and transform not only your own life, but the life of so many others around the world, you can get on the wait list now at Layla Martin VITA waitlist.
Yes. And, you know, Layla, I think you touched a point that is not explored enough when we're talking about doing sexuality work, which is the opening of the heart to love.
Yeah.
Because, of course, that was what was going on for me. You know, I didn't grow up with my father. He died when I was very young, so I didn't have that love from dad. Right? I experienced sexual abuse as a child by a man. So there was that, right? There was so, and of course, not even, I don't want to even go to the topic of racism and how pervasive that is to the sense of being lovable, right? So for me, I do think that this work that I did with Neo-Tantra and sexuality with an emphasis on spirituality was actually a work of opening my heart. Of course, opening pussy as well, right, which I love. Yeah. But it was a deep process of opening my heart and being able to risk, you know, being loved. There is nothing more scary to me than really being loved by a man. And I'm doing it. Like, David and I are good. You know? It's going to be 5 years of marriage. Yeah. So I do think that this idea that, oh, if I work on my sexuality too much, I will be too much for men. Yeah. I will be too powerful. I will be, especially for straight women here. Yeah. I don't think everybody has this experience. That is one way of looking at it. But what about if I open myself so much to be vulnerable, you know, to be in tender connection with someone, and to know that I have the power to also take risks, because relationships are filled with risks. I'm sure you know that. Then maybe I can change a pattern. And that's what I experienced. It was a shifting pattern. That was really, really big.
Right. And I think it can be easy sometimes to understand this in the opposite. So like, if you're a man listening to this right now, it's quite possible that you're like, yes, I would love a partner who is sexually awakened and open in their heart, right? Like, that really appeals to me. I could feel that maybe as a woman, you might be like, what? Like I'm doing this like for a man or whatever. But I want you to imagine, if you're a woman who dates men or is into men, or is married to a man, right? A man who is disconnected from his heart and only active in his sexuality. What do you do with that man? You take him home for a night, maybe, right? Yeah. Or you like flirt with him just for the evening. That's it. Maybe he's good for a dance, right? Like you're like, you know what, that man is a player, right? That man is there just for sex, right? If he is totally disconnected from his heart, you feel that in the field, right? And then what happens when you feel a man just in his heart with no sex? You're kind of like, oh, maybe a friend, right? Yes, like maybe you'll help me with my bag, you know, like, you know, that sort of feeling, right? Like, oh, wow, okay, like maybe, like you almost want to take care of him a little bit, right? Which to men feels like maybe icky sometimes, unless they've got that kink, right? The mother kink. But for women, just in the heart, it's kind of like, oh, I'll take care of her. I don't necessarily want to fuck her, right? So this merging, right, if you're into men, what happens when he has this sexual power and his heart open? You're like, oh, right? So that work of like, yes, bringing heart and sexuality in. And I don't think people, know that as much that true sexuality work will absolutely involve the heart. And be that that's such a core part of my teachings. And I do want to thank my teachers and my lineages for that, which is that to me definitely comes from the Taoist tradition in one sense, and Mantak Chia teaching, my teachers Minka Devas and Shashish Saluna, that like all sexuality really starts from the heart, especially in a feminine body, right? You open the heart first, and then that means that sexual awakening has a place to flow, right? So there's a deep emphasis in that tradition. And then in so many of the classical tantric traditions, the heart is central. Yes. Like it is the experience, right? And what you are really moving into and towards is that epic kind of love, spiritual love, personal love, self-love, right? And that gets forgotten a lot in Neo-Tantra. And understandably, when people are just seeing kind of the most PR fringe aspects of Neo-Tantra, it doesn't actually have a lot of heart. Sometimes that's just a perspective, and sometimes it genuinely doesn't have heart, right? And so this heart work is so essential to understand. And I found, as also a sexual abuse survivor and also someone whose father abandoned me, that the sexuality work was actually easier for me. It was easier for me to start becoming multi-orgasmic, to heal the sexual trauma, to move through all of those layers, which was no fucking joke. That was still, let's just be clear, that was still years of like lying on the floor and like moving through some really uncomfortable feelings. Like I don't want to minimize that journey at all. That was really intense. And I was just like, holy shit, letting love feel good, like letting love all the way in. Wow, like that truly feels like the journey of my lifetime. And I can feel how much my relational capacity has shifted with the opening of my own heart, feeling safe in my heart, and also conscientiously realizing, right? It was actually an ayahuasca journey where she was just like, love doesn't feel good to you from a man. And I could like actually literally feel the somatic field in my body that was like, get the fuck away. Like, you know, it's like, I would be like, oh yeah, I want like a beautiful, wonderful man to love me. But actually in my body, it was just like, no. And that's a big, that's one of the most valuable parts of this work, is that no matter what you say you want in your head, what you get is what your nervous system and your body believes to be safe. Yes. And often these barriers and these blockages are unconscious until we do the somatic work, until we do the trauma work, until we do the embodiment work. And so it's such a deeper journey than people ever even can kind of conceive of at first, when we're like, yeah, like let's have a better orgasm.
Yes. Yeah. And, you know, and they are so interconnected as well, because when we think about increasing our capacity for pleasure, we are also increasing our capacity for what comes with it.
Yeah.
Right? When we're increasing our capacity to love, be loved, accept love, we're also, you know, opening up a field to what comes with it. And for me, it is very important that we all understand that the barriers exist for a reason. So it's not about shaming ourselves. Like when I look at my past and the people I dated and the situations I put myself in, sometimes I'm like, where was I? What was I thinking? Yeah. Right? And then when I get myself thinking that, I immediately bring some compassion to the fact that there are multiple factors in my life that created those barriers. There are multiple things that I could name that justify the fact that I was really shut down to being loved, that I really couldn't take the risk, right? And then that slowly, through somatic work, through this bottom-up approach, right, to healing transformation, those layers could first be brought to my awareness, because most of them were like out of my sight, and then also offered love, compassion, holding, integration, healing. Yeah. Right? Yeah, and I do find it so beautiful that you're touching on the basic and foundational teachings from your teachings, that are the teachings from your teachers, that is that love is the superpower. Yeah. even if we're talking about more pleasure, a more orgasmic life, love is the superpower. If we're talking about better relationships, love is the superpower. If we're talking about motherhood, love is the superpower. Yeah.
Think of a coffee bean. It enhances energy, pleasure, focus. You can drink coffee, take the power of a plant, and shift your entire day. Now, you might hate coffee, you might love it, but you can't question the power of this singular bean to impact the nervous system in ways that have literally changed people's lives. Now, there are tens of thousands of plants with similar medicinal properties that could impact your nervous system to feel more sensual, more euphoric, more pleasurable, more activated with the goodness and magic of life. What could that do for you if instead of drinking coffee every morning, or in addition to drinking coffee every morning, you took a plant-activated supplement to be able to shift your nervous system out of chronic states of stress, energetic depletion, and overwhelm that so many of us battle with every single day, and into shimmering states of aliveness, magic, connection, and sensuality. If this is something that you crave in your life, you can check out the entire mood supplement line and so many of our magical plant ingredients over at shopmood.com. I'm here to let you know about one of my favorite practices, Orgasmic Breathwork. So what I've done is I have made 2 different audio guides for people of all genders to train you in how to use breathwork to have more orgasmic sexual experiences. So this breathwork trains you to get out of your head, into your body, to be able to expand pleasure from being localized in your cock or your pussy or intersex genitals into the whole expanse of your body, and to be able to orgasm stronger, longer, and more powerfully. So Orgasmic Breathwork is one of the most powerful tools that I've ever come across, and you can learn it in a 10-minute guided audio. So you can get it totally for free by downloading it on my website. You can head over to laylamartin.com/orgasmic breathwork. That's laylamartin.com/orgasmic breathwork. You can also find the link down in the show notes. I'm so excited for you to try this practice. It's truly revolutionary and is one of the fastest ways to experience what I'm talking about throughout this podcast, which is a deeper, more potent, more transcendental sexual experience. I created this mastermind for couples because it is the experience that I wanted for me and my beloved. I was like, where can we learn Tantra together? Where can we become masterful at sacred sexuality together? And beyond that, where can we get the same education in how to communicate at a ninja level, and how to create emotional safety for one another, and on how to heal on the deepest levels whatever wounds keep us from staying in love over a lifetime? That's why I made this mastermind. It is going to be super fun because you get to go on the sexual adventure of a lifetime. I'm talking majestic European castles, beautiful nature experiences where you will be trained step by step in how to create erotic rituals and how to make love in an energetic and advanced spiritual way. It is, You'll also get 6 months of in-person classes on relational skills and tools, and also erotic mastery. Everything from how to touch each other in the most exquisitely sensual way, to how to have the most incredible energy orgasms together, to just how to say difficult things in a deeply loving way. You are going to get the advanced relationship training of a lifetime. If this is something you're interested in, you can go ahead and check it out at laylamartin.com/tantric mastermind. Me and Marina are sitting here drinking Sex Magic. This is an all-natural elixir. It makes this beautiful blue colored fruity beverage. And what it does is it makes you feel more sensation. It is designed to be taken before sex, before date nights. It gives you that feeling of like rushy activation. It enhances blood flow. And it has a lot of dopamine activators, so it makes you crave and desire even more. One thing that's really beautiful about this is it also gives you energy energy and it has no caffeine. So I love to take it at night, even for like working out at the gym, getting stuff done, or if I'm about to fall asleep and, you know, my partner wants to have sex and I'm like, ooh, this is where sex magic is amazing.
Yeah, I love it actually when I'm feeling a little disconnected from my own pleasure practices. And it's almost like the ritual of preparing sex magic and drinking it starts putting me in the mood, right?
Yeah.
So, and then I start with the practice that we shared about connecting with my body and awakening my pleasure. And for sure, it takes my experience to a much deeper level because it does bring me to more awareness of those subtle sensations, of those micro pleasures that are so, so important for our erotic activation. Yeah.
Play was designed for the woman who spends all day working really hard, being really focused. Maybe you're at your computer, maybe you got like 5 kids, and it's just like go, 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 go. And when it's time to switch off, it can actually take our nervous system a minute to go from go mode into just like, I'm ready to play, I'm ready to have pleasure. So we formulated all these ingredients, things like kanna, cacao, sacred lotus, to be able to accelerate that transition from deep focus, hard work into, wow, I want to play, I want to do a yoga class, I want to make love, I want to do a breathwork session, I want to snuggle up with my pet and feel cozy and yummy inside. And what's really cool is because it's cacao based, you can make these really amazing drinks with it as well.
Yes, and that's what I do. Like, I love having cacao, and then I add play to my cacao. And for me, the description can only be like being embraced by this velvety blanket of warm, cozy sensations. And that takes me deeper into my own meditation practices, the rituals that I do when I drink cacao. Plus, it tastes amazing. I actually like to mix it instead of taking the capsule because it does enhance the taste of my cacao drink.
Yo,
really
I love
good.
that. This one I really love as a drink mix, even though we have it as capsules as well. And I love it before I'm about to do anything in my body. It really enhances that experience of bliss. And humans have had this relationship with plants since the beginning of time, right? Taking plants to shift our mood, to shift our experience. And so we really formulated this with this understanding of the power of plants and plants that you can take every day, where there's no come down, there's no side effects. They're only good for your body, but they still boost and enhance your nervous system's capacity to play, to feel good, to have pleasure daily.
Yeah, so good. And, you know, I do think that because cacao is a natural activator of the heart, it opens our heart. When you bring that quality of the plant medicine with another plant, cacao, it's really an experience of so much expansion. I've had incredible meditations by drinking cacao with play, like really beautiful things happening.
When it comes to human relationships, I'm more monogamously inclined, but when it comes to my plants, orgy is the way to go. So this is like a plant orgy with cacao as the leader.
Yes.
Oh, wow. All right. So in your journey, like when we were talking beforehand, you really started to focus in on trauma. Why?
Yeah.
And where do you see that trauma shows up in female sexuality specifically?
Yeah. Well, first because I have my own share of traumas, sexual trauma, pervasive racial trauma, most recently immigration trauma that I wasn't counting on. And because when I started working with mostly women and in their erotic aliveness, in their erotic awakening and liberation, what I started noticing is that people were terrified. They were so scared. They wanted, like they reached out, they hired me, they paid me, and they just couldn't. They couldn't be with the potency and the beauty of their bodies, of their sexuality, of their pleasure, of the orgasmic experience. And of course, I realized the fact was that they had too much unintegrated trauma. So there was a part of me that felt really deeply called to supporting them with this piece of the journey as well, so that they could actually have the fun of the next stage of it, right? And it is also some sort of intergenerational healing. When I look at the history of my family, every single woman from my female lineage has experienced some sort of sexual boundary violation. Every single one. If I go to my father's lineage, I'm sure every single one as well. So there is a way that I found that in order to honor the stories of those women who came before me, it would be very beautiful and even magical to actually, engage with healing people from the very things that affected every woman in my family, right? And what is so beautiful is to actually, for me, to witness someone who comes to work with me feeling numb, shut down, disconnected. I have many women who are married and are unable to have sex with their partners for years and years. It's just not possible. And to see them navigating this beautiful journey of reclamation of their inner safety, of, bringing the fragmented pieces back together into wholeness, and giving themselves permission to feel pleasure, permission to desire, to be desired. It's such a magnificent thing to witness that I feel really blessed to be doing this. And then to have them also moving into this place of erotic power, of wildness, because I have both. I have the tenderness, the deep love, care for trauma survivors and to support them. But I also have the fire. I love the fire. I love a room full of women having multiple full-body orgasms, and I'm just like, as a maestra, playing the orchestra of that. And being able to just see that flourishment, that blossoming, it's just something that I had no idea would happen in my life, that I would end up doing. So going back to the beginning of our conversation, I don't really know how I ended up here.
Like, turns out I'm a sex witch,
Yes.
Turns out I was like, turns out we all are, but
yeah.
Yeah, well, there's two pieces I would love to highlight from that share.
Yeah.
The first is how pervasive trauma is underneath our cultural sexual functioning and how little that is still recognized. That when someone says, I'm numb, you and I both know now, it means that you don't feel safe to feel what's underneath. Yeah. Right? And for me, I was numb for 7-8 years during sex, right? I remember my first therapist when I showed up and I was like a hurricane of drama. I was weird. I can't even remember now, but I didn't even want to pay her for the session. I was I was that person, right? And back then I was also the one that everyone wanted to save. They're like, that one's got talent, Yes. And I was like, just try. Yeah. And but she was like, Layla, what do you feel in your body? And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? I don't feel anything in my body, right? And I remember when she started leading me through the first somatic exercises of put your hands on your body and what kind of sensations do you feel, right? And I remember just being like, I don't feel anything below my neck. I just don't, right? And so we literally inch by inch would start to feel. And I remember when I stopped being numb, and I was with this amazing man at the time, I've talked about him elsewhere, Ryan, who just loved the living shit out of me. And all I could feel was the most horrific disgust, crawl out of my skin, something got into my body and it died, and it's been festering for years, and now I'm dealing with this rotting internal feeling. And I was like, sure was smart of my body to numb out, And I think that's the part that we miss sometimes. We can be so angry at ourselves for being numb. And we see this all the time, right? People in the programs being so angry with themselves. And one of the things I love to teach is your body is intelligent, right? It didn't make sense for me to feel all that disgust. I probably couldn't have even functioned. So being that numb was highly intelligent of my body. And at a certain point, I was like, the numbness isn't worth it to me anymore. I'm willing to feel what's underneath it. And I remember like, oh God, all right. Like, woo! And I've also seen that underneath the numbness sometimes is lust, sometimes is joy. Like you don't know what's under there, but if it was unsafe enough to feel joy, to feel desire, if you got slut shamed, right, that can be underneath this numbness. This brings me to the other point, which is that we'll tend to think, oh, sexual trauma must be the most acute forms of it, right? Like what both you and I experienced of just like overt sexual abuse, right? And there are certainly horrific amounts of sexual violence and trauma happening on this planet right now. And our everyday culture of rape culture, of misogyny, of sex negativity can be traumatizing. Enough porn can be traumatizing to anybody's body, but specifically to the male body. Men, to me, have a huge trauma field of being heavily conditioned that their sexuality has to operate in a certain way, that they have to dominate, that they are taking from someone with their sexuality, right? And these trauma fields push us up into our head. Right. And I think that's what people don't understand is when we feel stuck in our heads, stuck in fantasizing, and fantasizing can be beautiful, but when that's the only thing you can do, you're stuck in your head. Right. And this push from the body up into our head, our sexuality has become so heady without us even realizing it. And all of the like, do I look okay? Does my partner love me? Am I doing this fast enough? Am I doing okay? Or like, I have to function. I have to give her 14 orgasms. I have to give him like the prostate orgasm of his life. Like all of this is usually trauma, unrecognized trauma that's pushed us into our heads. And sex then is no longer as satisfying in our bodies. And so we have to thrill seek to make up for it, right? And then it's just like novelty, newness, right? Rather than real sexual satiation. So one of the beauties of the world starting to heal from sexual trauma, and we're just starting, is that we can become sexually satiated again rather than just like ravenously hungry, which is what the mind will do when it's disconnected from the body.
Yes. Yeah. And, you know, I also think that disconnection, body-mind, is also what brings these connections to love, to relationships, right? So for folks who are trying to, because, you know, so many people actually want to do some sexual work because of their relationships, because of the fact that they can either not even date because it's just not available for them, or the relationships they are in is not working. They're completely disconnected. And I do think that there needs to be an acknowledgement that sexual trauma, sexual disconnection doesn't only impact our sexuality. It's so much bigger than that, right? It does impact even our capacity to relate to our friends, to our family members, to our work colleagues. It impacts our capacity to be leaders, to be creatives, to be artists, you know, to be bold in the things that we're doing, to be better activists, better community organizers. So there is a way that this disconnection that you talk about, for me, permeates all aspects of life that people don't really realize. Right? And when we bring somatic work, when we bring this reconnection, we click again, as I like to say, it is something that starts permeating all aspects of life as well, right? So then you become a better leader, then you become a better parent, then you become someone who can, you know, support all the things that we're doing to fight all the dirty, the nastiness in this world, right? But how can we do that if we're not connected to the self, right? If the rupture started here,
I still remember the first time you spoke on one of our VITA Zoom calls, and I was like, yeah, that's a voice that changes the world. So my question to this is, what is a good trauma practice that someone can do that is a good starter for this, right? Obviously, doing programs, working with experts, this is a long-term journey. And people I know are curious. We're talking about sexual trauma healing. What is a tool? And I'd love also if you could describe it from like, how did you use it? Like, how does it feel when you do it in your body?
So for me, it has everything to do with befriending the body again. Right? So the first step for any somatic work is that actually you engage with your soma, your living body in its wholeness. What I like to call body, mind, spirit. But the soma is the living body in its wholeness. So if we take that into consideration, the first practice is right here, right now. What can I notice about my soma? Right here, right now, I notice my feet on the floor. Oh, there's support from this chair coming. You know, I can lean back. I can feel the pillow here. Oh, my pelvis, my hips feel really supported by this. The temperature is comfortable, right? You can start from the peripheries of your body, noticing, and then you go inwards. What about inside? Am I satiated from my lunch? Do I feel full? Is my stomach, do I have a headache? What is going on with my heartbeat? How am I breathing? So for me, the first step to heal from the fragmentation of trauma is to start bringing the pieces back together. It doesn't need to be anything drastic nor complex. It's really present moment awareness. What is happening here? Where am I? What is the texture of my clothes on my skin? What do I feel? How heavy is my earring here? Very simple things. And from there, we start going inner and inner. So we start developing a sense of interoception, which is our awareness to feel what's happening inside, including with our organs and all of that. But as you said in your own journey, that's not readily available for most people. So how about we just, orient, what calls my attention in this space? I like these flowers, or, Layla's lipstick is really, doing it. It's rocking it.
Glad I'm trauma healing with my lipstick choice.
Yes. And then coming closer to the body.
Yeah.
Right? What is touching the body, what is supporting the body, the temperature of the body, the light that is touching my body here that I'm feeling right now, the warmth of it, and going inwards. Right? For me, if a person could do that, let's say for 5 minutes every day for a month, they would certainly start first developing much more awareness of where they're at. And unfortunately, trauma messes that up a little bit, right? So people who have a lot of flashbacks and all of that, or dissociate and disconnect from their environments. So it starts bringing them a little bit more anchored into the present moment and to the awareness of what is going on here in this body that for sexual trauma survivors can be a space of deep fear, wounding, pain sometimes. So for me, having a slow, gentle, delicate pace is also very important in all of this. So you don't need to sit for 1 hour, being with your body. It might be too much. Do 5 minutes and notice what happens.
Totally.
Yeah.
And something I feel like you can add to that I had very little awareness of is deep containment for the body.
Yeah.
So like a weighted blanket or just basic things that help your nervous system relax. So essential oils that you smell right before you settle in, basically things that help your body realize that it's a safe space because we're mammals. So if you think like, what would a kitten love, right? Like being stroked, being held, being by a warm fire, right? Yeah. Like I'm obsessed with a biomat, but anything warm can really help your body feel snug, contained, held as well. And so when you do this, if you're going to do this for 5 minutes, if you can emphasize the mammalian comfort of your body, this can also really help for your body to start to reset of this understanding of like, oh, I'm in a safe world, right?
Yeah.
No, regardless of what happened in the past, right now it's actually safe. Yeah. And this is one of the biggest pieces of trauma healing, right? Is being able to say, yeah, it might not have been safe at some point in the past, but can my nervous system feel safe right now when I actually am safe, right? Yeah. So this helps to repattern in that way. And what you're describing, trauma or no trauma, ends up being one of the most powerful practices for better sex.
Oh, yes.
Because it also trains you to get out of your head, back into your body, and to feel your sensations. And it sounds super obvious, but we really miss this a lot. The best sex happens in the body. And a lot of us think we're in our bodies when we're having sex, but we're actually not. Most people are in their heads, right? They're in some form of fantasy, some form of thought, some form of future orientation, right? Even, am I going to orgasm fast enough? Is my partner loving this? All of that is being in our heads. And so doing this practice, like you described, also starts to resensitize the body, living in such a disembodied world, right? Even just spending time on our phones, spending time on the computer, being in really busy environments takes us out of our body and into our head. This very simple coming back home into your body can actually revolutionize your life. And you're exactly right. You only have to do it for 5 minutes.
Yes. Yeah. And, I think that it is important also to talk about the senses, since you brought touch to the conversation, because we do experience life through our senses. Yeah. Our sight, our hearing, our smell, our taste, our sense of touch. So I do think that one beautiful way to also bring that somatic awareness is by engaging the different senses. Yeah. Right? As you said, essential oil, or just, what can I smell right here? Yeah. Right? What is the taste in my mouth at this moment? And when we transport that into sexual intimacy, it really opens up an awareness to what I like to say, the micro pleasure that is already available in our bodies. We're just not paying attention. Most people are just paying attention to the peak pleasure experience. But if we start engaging with our bodies with that deeper sense of presence, embodied awareness, and activation of our senses, we start noticing that, oh, yeah, pussy's lit, she's wet, she's great, and, ooh, my feet touching the sheets in this bed, that is so pleasurable. The touch, the temperature, the texture of it. And for me, that is one of the experiences that really showed me that there is so much more pleasure available in my body than what I was used to paying attention to, right? And for folks who have, let's say, a very hard time feeling pleasure in their genitals, noticing that maybe at the back of their knees, there's a very pleasurable spot that if they touch it and caress it in a given way, it feels really, really good. I also think that it starts shifting this goal-oriented kind of sex, right? Oh, is she almost there? Is he gonna come? Is this good enough? And it becomes really about the experience, right? Not sex as something we do, but sex as an experience that we have and a place that we go in our erotic exploration. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I'm curious then, you mentioned going into full body orgasm and also having just, you talk to Jesus and Buddha while breathing. So can you give us a good practice for accessing states of pleasure? And maybe with basic breath work as well, something that's safe to do at home.
Yeah. Well, I do love something that I learned from you, obviously, which is this combination of what you taught us at the beginning as the holistic sex tools. So engaging the breath, sounding, movement, mindfulness, embodied awareness that I was just talking about, and self-pleasuring. Yeah. right? So for me, a very beautiful practice is to first start by coming home to the body. So that embodied awareness piece of realizing where you are, and then realizing what is touching your body, what is around you, and then coming closer, what it feels like in the body, sensations and all of that. And from there, you start engaging with some sensual movements. Sensual looks like many, many things around the world. So it doesn't need to be, pretending to be someone else. What is sensual for you? And start bringing that motion to your body. What is a pleasurable touch that you can bring to your skin? How can you awaken your skin in a pleasurable way and not going straight to breast, straight to pussy, straight to butt? Being more like expanding that awareness. And then using the breath first to connect to different parts of the body. And because we're talking about pleasure, I love using breath to connect first with my heart, now going back to love being the superpower, and opening up my heart, and also opening up the pleasure of my breasts, of my nipples, massaging the breasts, the nipples, using some oil and all of that, but breathing with awareness in this region. And then bringing the breath down to pussy, bringing the breath down to cervix, to womb space, to anus, to the whole sexual center, moving, touching, adding self-pleasure, adding stroking your clitoris, doing whatever you want, having your sex toys, but engaging the body in as many ways as possible. Sounding as pussy, right? Giving voice to your pleasure. And for me, that is the way that pleasure is not just focused, especially for folks with pussies. It's usually focused on the clitoris. You stimulate it, you go for it, you're done in a couple of minutes, right?
Yeah.
And it actually expands the experience so much that it can lead to a full body orgasm. So much that that full body orgasm could last, 20 minutes, let's say, which is deep fulfilling, right? So earlier today, you talked about also sex not being fulfilling when it's this goal-oriented kind of thing, performative kind of thing. I do think the fact that many people are not feeling satisfied in sex is because they're practicing it with distancing. It's the performance, right? When we engage breath, sound, movement, touch, opening up, really being it, letting the mind go. It doesn't matter if you're shaved or not, if you're put on weight or not. It doesn't matter.
Totally.
Being it, enjoy it, give space to it. It's really deeply satisfying. Yeah. It's the difference between having a fully organic home-cooked meal and McDonald's.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
And I feel to say something here, as a left-handed tantrika, I love graveyards, right? Cremation grounds are a big part of that practice, which essentially is to do spiritual practice in deep communion with death, right? And so one of my all-time dreams was to make love in a cemetery. And so me and my current partner did just that for my birthday. And what was so sacred to me is as I was making love to him and looking around with death all around me, I was like, sure is fucking stupid to hold back one little bit of pleasure, one drop of pleasure, right? And I say that with deep humility for all of us who are playing the game of holding back our pleasure and the stress and the trauma and all of that. And I was like, why would I hold back any love? Like, I'm headed straight for death, right? And sometimes, even when we're having these trauma conversations and we're having all these conversations about why we're blocked and how the blockage happens, sometimes it's like, let's look around and realize life is so sacred and so short and it goes by like that. Why are we playing this game of denying ourselves pleasure? Why are we playing the game of holding back our hearts, right? And not just opening and loving. And it was one of the greatest gifts to be so close to death, and to realize how silly that game can be, even though it makes so much sense in the moment, right? It makes so much sense to let our fear win in the moment, or to let everybody else's story about pleasure and love and heartbreak win. But actually, like, in this precious lifetime, are you going to open or not? Is that what you really want or not? And there's something so beautiful about that. And I love that you've just articulated a core pleasure practice, right? Which can be done 10 minutes, 15 minutes. You know, it's like once a week, even once a month, that can reprogram your sexuality, right? So you would start with that body meditation of tuning into your body. And then you can start, as you were saying, with some sensual activation, or just like, you know, sensation of smell, things like that, music playing. You were saying breast massage really helps, breathing into your heart, breathing into your breast, getting a heart activation, then moving to pussy and clitoris, deepening your breath. And you said sounding, which it's like you breathe in and then you sound what you're feeling, right? And sound is usually the hardest for most people, but it unlocks that sonic vibration is so powerful, both for the vagus nerve, toning it, relaxing it, softening it open, and for the activation of energy throughout the body, right? So sounding, even though it can be scary, is so important. So you're touching yourself, you're inhaling, feeling the sensation, exhaling, sounding, right? And continuing to meditate on the sensations of your body. This practice, this is like the core, right? If you were like, how would I do yoga? And you're like, well, yoga is this big complex system, right? But I could teach you a sun salutation.
Yes.
And even though that would never get you to the full depth and majesty of the yogic tradition, you would at least be on your way to understanding, oh, the shape of the body changes my consciousness. Oh, the meditation of the sun can bring me into devotion. Oh, when I breathe, as I flow through the asanas, right, I can actually feel a flow state of unity with the universe. And you start just through understanding a sun salutation. You start to taste some of the magic of yoga. For so many people, sacred sexuality is such a foreign concept, right? Neo-Tantra is such a foreign concept, but this one pleasure practice can start to become the foundation. It's literally like a sun salutation, but for sacred sexuality, where you can start to touch and know that the system is so much more vast than that, right? That is the foundation on which then you can like skyrocket through universes. And that's always what I run up against when we're talking about sacred sexuality is like how vast the system really is, how massive the exploration is, how it can engage you over a lifetime or lifetimes, right? And still wanting to give people a building block that they can start with. Because even just that can then open you into going to the retreat that changes your life, or starting in the program that changes your destiny, or realizing what it is that's been holding you back from the love you really want, whether it's in your marriage, in your long-term relationship, or with someone new, you know?
Yeah. Totally. And it also increases your repertoire of how pleasure can be felt in the body.
Yeah.
And I think that's another key piece for anyone who wants to, expand their pleasurable capacity. They need to open up to the fact that there is not just one way of feeling pleasure. There is not just one way of being multi-orgasmic, right? The practice that I just explained, if you stay with it for long enough, and then if you start increasing it, the intensity of it, the intensity of breath, maybe the breath at the beginning is through your nose, but then you change it into a full open mouth connected breath work that is going to activate much more of your energy. The point is, if you're not present in your body, there is no amount of energy activation that will, make you realize that your erotic energy is there.
Yeah.
So for me, the building blocks are so, so important because they make it possible for you to have the other experiences that you want to have.
Yeah. All right. So this brings us to the finality. This brings us to the end, which trying to use fancy words and forgetting English, which is that you are a teacher, as mentioned before, in my VITA coaching certification. You've been teaching for years with me. It's such an honor to be able to teach and collaborate together. And, one thing about that program is that it ends up being like 2 years of curriculum, and we it's like, we're just getting started, you know? So this is something I really want to impress upon people, is the depth of this work, the depth of this tradition, right? And I was able to create that program and what is called the VITA methodology from many lineages that I studied with. I worked with teachers for 3-4 years, studied in various schools for a long period of time to create this. And it really is a synthesis of neo-tantric practices, this awakening of our sexual selves, and then using that as a portal to sacred and spiritual realization. It is also deeply classical tantric. It is based on classical tantric philosophy, and that it is built on this understanding that everything is goddess, which means everything is sacred, which means every part of our body is holy. And what are the practices and tools that allow us to live that for real? And one of the things I love about classical Tantra is it's an enlightenment tradition, right? So you want spiritual realization. That is the hallmark and the defining feature of the tradition, but you also get to enjoy your life along the way. So this idea that doing spirituality and using that realization to have better relationships, more amazing sex, this is a classical tantric teaching, and it's woven into it because so often, especially in the West and especially through the Judeo-Christian traditions, we've been taught that to be spiritual is to actually be the opposite of the body, to be the opposite of relationship. Like, maybe you're married, but like that ain't the focus, you know? And like, so this, what does a lived spirituality look like through birth? What does it look like through lovemaking? What does it look like through divine sacred union and partnership? What does it look like through self-love of the body? You know, sometimes we think that spirituality has to be so obscure and so fancy and so out there, but it really is these basics. And something that I've really been learning so much more and owning so much more deeply too in the tantric tradition is that a lot of the really advanced classical traditions, so the Sri Vidya, the Kashmir Shaivism, they all were using Vedic practices, Sanskrit mantras, deep philosophy to make original Tantra very available to educated people, right, to kings and to the upper classes. And they were basically saying, like, look, this is fit for like public consumption, right? And that can be beautiful for a tradition. And what we can forget sometimes is there are deep classical traditions that honored sexuality, the body, menstrual blood, semen, female gurus, right, that were wild to the core with the intention of liberating people in service of devotion. So there is, I think it's just important for people to realize that both of those strains exist even in the classical traditions, and that to liberate yourself through the body is a very classical tantric practice. And that while there can be all these very advanced teachings, I love them because I'm a hardcore nerd. At the end of the day, these traditions are pointing us towards epic, unconditional self-love of all of ourselves. They're pointing us towards God realization in this moment, in this body, in this life. And they're pointing us towards a universe that wants our spiritual realization, that wants us to have a multitude of experiences, but that also wants us to know the sweet, benevolent blessings of the goddess as well in everything that we do and everything that we touch. So I kind of got rabbit holed there. What I really wanted to ask was, what is it like to teach in the program?
Exactly that.
I haven't had a chance yet to ever share on the podcast what not only is the program to me, and I still haven't even touched on that much, but what is it that I actually teach? You know, like, where does it come from? How do I understand it? And so much of classical tantric philosophy and practice showed me this much deeper truth that a mystical tradition can point us towards, that is so much about falling in love with all of reality as an act of devotion to the goddess herself, rather than a rejection of reality as some sort of spirit is somewhere else. Spirit is not here. You know, like, what is more God than this moment, this body, this experience, that coming home to ourselves? And so for me to give people a framework that points them back home to that realization has been one of my highest, like, honors and loves and blessings in this lifetime. And we masturbate a lot on Zoom. So go.
There's that.
So what is the program like, and what is it for you to teach in the program?
Yeah, well, I feel deeply honored to be teaching in this program because I have experienced the VITA methodology myself. I have seen it in action with my clients. And for me, if I could summarize it in a very, simple way, as I like to put things, for me, the VITA methodology is helping people journey back to the wholeness of their divine selves. Yeah. That's the sentence I would use. How we do it? Yes, we do it through pleasures, through integration of shadows. We do it through integration and liberation of emotions, which is a big theme inside of the program. But all of it with this understanding that, yes, comes from classical Tantra, and that I do think that you have a masterful way of alchemizing in a coaching methodology. I mean, I don't even understand how you did that. I just feel really, excited about it. But this perception that there is no separation, that all aspects of us are divine, including our sexuality, including our very hard emotions, shame, guilt, disgust, and that through this body, through the soma, again, the living body in its wholeness, we can experience that again. Because in my perception, Layla, we have just forgotten. We're just children of the universe who forgot who we really are. Aspects of the divine. One with the goddess, one with God, however people want to call it. Right? So for me, VITA is this remembrance. The sacred remembrance of who we are, the sacred remembrance that, at least in this incarnate experience, we do experience life through the body. How can we leave the body out of the equation when we're trying to become whole again? Yeah? And it is, I didn't even know I would become a teacher inside of the program. And, again, the goddess, she guides me. She has always guided me, since I was a very young child. I have always had a very developed mediumship, very open connection to the spirit world. And she guided me in this path, right? So for me, it feels almost like a natural development of what I should be doing these days. And it feels massive, because we have hundreds of students spread worldwide, people from all kinds of backgrounds, different cultures, and all of that, and all of them awakening at least a little bit more, remembering at least a little bit more that they too are divine. And then spreading that in their work as coaches. And that's what is so special about VITA being a training for coaches, because then the ripple effects, we don't even know, to be honest, right? We cannot keep track of the thousands of students who took the program, but we plant seeds, and these seeds are sprouting and blossoming everywhere in different ways. And for me, that is the work of bringing Goddess conscious back to this time and age. And so for me, I'm a servant. I'm in service of the goddess. I'm in service of bringing back Goddess conscious to this time and age, and also in service of shedding light to the big shadow that is still is obscuring sexuality.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. And I think that is a big feature of what we do and how we hold the space, because to me, I always felt I am a guardian of this work. I am of service to the goddess, and I am of service not only to all the people that I teach, but to everyone that they will ever reach with their teaching. And this sense of service to the higher power that is us, and that is also so much bigger than what we would call just us. that is a hallmark of how we hold the program. And it makes a really big difference. So thank you for joining me in that. And it's such a pleasure and an honor to be able to teach with you and by your side. You're an extraordinary teacher.
Thank you.
So on that note then, one of the ways people can work with you is by doing VITA coaching and experiencing you as an exquisite teacher and your leadership in the program and us teaching the live retreats. And if people feel drawn to working with you outside of that, how can they work with you? How can they find you?
Yes, well, my website is the best place for people to find me, marinanabão.com. I'm sure it's going to be on the show notes.
Yeah.
And I see people one-on-one for somatic trauma healing and embodiment coaching, and really keeping the journey in mind, the journey of healing from trauma so that you can experience pleasure, enjoy, and erotic aliveness, and really, have a sense of thriving in your life. I do that in person in Mill Valley, the Bay Area, and also online, worldwide. And I'm also in your pleasure programs outside of VITA coaching, which is also something that I really love. VITA Sacred Sexuality, Crystal Pleasure, and so on. So, yeah, I'm all over the place. And I love it.
Also, for those who are listening, you might want to spell out your website so they can just search and find you.
Yeah, so Marina, like the boat place, Marina, Nabão, my last name, Nabao.com. And my Instagram is Marina Nabão as well.
Yo! Yes. All right. Well, blessings on your baby. I remember seeing you at a retreat and you were like, I will get pregnant. And I was like, yes, queen.
Exactly. Here we are.
Here we are. Oh, yay. All right. Thank you. It's been a delight to have you here.
Thank you, Layla. It's such a joy. I really, really appreciate you. And I'm really grateful. I love you. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this Tantric Life. I am Layla Martin. This is the home for the realest conversations about sex, spirituality, polarity, conscious relationships, and all kinds of topics that help us live the absolute most incredible lives. Please check out the next episode. Please go ahead and leave your rating and review on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. It's so, so, so helpful when you do that. If you want to stay connected to me, the most helpful supportive thing you can do is to head over to laylamartin.com, sign up with your email address. That connects you to me if you want to study deeper with me, if you want to receive my deeper teachings. I do it predominantly via email. Finally, you can check me out on Instagram at @TheLaylaMartin. And thank you so, so, so much for being here.